Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program 2, where last episode we created this monstrosity, and to be clear, I don't think I want to go with this. It is ridiculous, but for the memes, we're going to put it on Eve and test it. It's going to explode horribly because I don't think there are struts in here. I added these in post last episode, and yeah, this is not going to go well. We're going to put this out on the pad. I'm going to teleport this over to Eve, and we're going to try it out for the memes, but this isn't going to work, and I'd like to think about perhaps a different design. We're going to go for... I don't know. This is going to be something completely different. Almost certainly. We need something that can lift us up high enough where our... Like, we need to get up to, like, 30 kilometers, right? That's what we need to do. Let's see how horribly this goes. Oh my, this is already going horribly wrong. It's going to explode in moments. This is amazing. Look at this frame rate. I love it. We've got like 1 frame per 8 seconds or so. Astounding. Let's pause the simulation. Eventually it'll get caught up. I'm not even going to try to launch this thing. I'm just trying to pause the simulation right now so we can revert this. This is, this is amazing. I love it. Okay, we paused the simulation. Are we still getting 1 frame per 8 seconds? No. It's now actually marginally playable. Okay, beautiful. We're going to revert that back to the VAB, and I'm just... The main problem with it is we're relatively neutral on each of these engines. Each one of these is adding such a tiny amount of thrust to weight that I don't think it's worth pursuing this route. So we're going to go a slightly different route. There was one suggested by Heather Jared on the Discord about a spaceplane route, and that's an interesting route for sure. I think we might take a look at that. The main reason why that's interesting is because we don't need 1.0 thrust to weight to get off the ground. If we can get a space plane that lifts us up with the hydrogen engine high enough up that we can at that point go for the just go for orbit, then that's definitely an interesting idea. So what we would end up doing is we would end up removing all of these, right? So we just detach this. Yeah, this is going to be very laggy for a moment here, and then we get rid of that. Like this. And we just have this guy. Now, I'm going to get rid of this heat shield, actually, and the decoupler down there. So we're just going to leave it like this for now. This will do for the moment. Then, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to try to put some form of wings on it to try to get some lift. Now, keep in mind, Eve wings are not going to be that, like, we're not going to need that much to actually lift this thing off. So I'm really bad at building space planes, just a heads up, but we'll see how this ends up going. Let's go into mirror symmetry mode, and we're going to put this guy about, I don't know where our center of mass versus center of lift is here. We should definitely check that out. Center of pressure, they call it in this game. That's actually pretty decent right there, actually. And then we can do a stabilizer in the back here. I don't actually want to be in symmetry mode for that. We can do a stabilizer kind of like this. And then the idea would be that we would need to have some wheels on it, and we would land this thing like a plane, even if it's in the water. Now, does this have any sort of elevons on it? No, I don't. Well, maybe. These look like elevons to me. It doesn't actually say. I'm assuming these are elevons for right now. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not sure if this is enough lift, but this is the Eve atmosphere we're talking about, so we need to think about that. So the next question is, what are we going to do for our wheels? Now, keep in mind, we're probably going to be landing in the water on this thing. So we probably don't even need wheels, technically. But we don't know that for an absolute fact. So we may want to go with like medium landing gear, one up here, And then, let's see, we want to be pitched in such a way... Yeah. So then the medium landing gear back here we would do in mirror symmetry mode. So we would want these to be like back here, but we're going to need to rotate those, right? And these are going to be rotated to be approximately like that. Okay. I'm going to disable steering on these back wheels. There we go. And then we're going to switch the orientation of this. Okay. So something like that. Now, this is going to be launched as a rocket, and what we're going to do actually now is I'm going to save this, and I'm going to overwrite the monstrosity that we created last episode, because I don't want to remember that. We're going to do that. We're going to put this out on the pad, and the question is, what does this look like? And re-entry is going to be a whole different thing, keep in mind. What does this look like on Eve? Obviously, this is in a strange orientation right now, but let's just take this over to Eve and see what this looks like from the ground. Re-entry is a whole different question at this point. So let's see. I don't want to be in orbit. I want to be in surface mode, and longitude can be at 0. Let's put the latitude. I don't know. I'd like this to be on the day side, ideally. I don't know if this is going to be the day side or not. We're just kind of choosing at random. Okay. This is not the day side. Let's try again. Okay, things are breaking right now. That's understood. We're just trying to grab ourselves a location here. Let's revert this back to the launch. Yes, I'm aware of this. We should probably turn off crash damage for the purposes of this test, because we're just trying to get this into a landed orientation to see if we can take back off, is the idea here. I think that we probably can, but let's go into our settings here. Let's make sure that infinite electricity is on. I'm not going to turn on infinite propellant. That's not needed. Unbreakable joints is currently on. Okay, that looks perfect. And part overheating is on. I want that to be on, so that looks fine. But there's not actually no crash damage in KSP2, so that is, you know, exciting. Let's try this in a latitude around here. And we're probably going to need to change the orientation on this. Is there a latitude here that is not on the dark side of Eve? That's exciting. We're getting dark sides everywhere. Okay. This is pretty close to not being on the dark side, actually. Well, this is because we're changing the latitude. Right. We need to go something like this. I'm dumb. That makes a lot more sense. Okay. So let's put this around here. There we go. That's on the day side. And we can see this is not exactly the kind of place we want to be landed. Let's turn our brakes on. Wow, that actually braked very effectively. I'm actually shocked that we're not in a situation right now where this is broken. That's a little wild. Let's turn the brakes off here. And the question is, if we get a bit of speed going here, can we lift this off? That's inauspicious. This is a fair amount of speed, for sure. Okay, we just broke our engine. So this is on land. I would prefer not to be on land here on Eve, for sure. But that was fairly inauspicious. Let's head back to the VAB. We might just need more power here. We might need to carry some sort of, like, lift assist engines along with us, like SRBs or something. We'll see if that ends up happening. But for now, what I want to do is I want to scope us out a position to place this. And I also want to rotate this. So I want to grab this guy here, and I want to rotate this to be like this. There we go. And we'll just save this for now. We're going to rotate it back later. But that was an interesting experience, for sure. I don't want that. I want to check this. So if we're in Eve atmosphere 0, this is 0.09 thrust to weight. So I think that we should probably consider including some sort of takeoff assist engines here. That said, that was pretty decent. but we're getting pretty much all of our speed from rolling downhill. That is something to note. So, takeoff assist engines would look something like this. We would have some decouplers here. We'd put them in, not in this orientation, but in perhaps like this orientation. Okay, I don't love that angling. So this would need to get rotated to be something like this. And then we could bring some small SRBs to help us just push forward and hopefully get enough speed going to get off the ground. And get high enough up for our hydrogen engines to take over. That would be the ideal situation there. So maybe like thumpers would be interestingly sized to do that. Something like this. And then we could just put some like nose cones on that just in case. Okay, so something kind of like this, right? And then this engine should fire at pretty much the same time and assist them in the takeoff. And then we'll save this for now. That, of course, will be saved as the Eve lander. And let's put this out on Eve. I'd like to scope out a place in the Explodium for this to go. Well, that's inauspicious, but it didn't actually explode, so that's a good sign. Let's move this over, and I'd like this to be, like, in a slightly different latitude. Okay. So this isn't exactly where I want to be, but I want to zoom out a bit and just take a peek. There's a lot of land here. Noted. Let's just switch over a little ways. Okay. We're just looking for somewhere that's not land. Is Eve just mostly land in KSP2? That's kind of wild. Okay, we're finding a whole lot of land and not a lot of Explodium. Here's some Explodium. Okay, perfect. So we're just going to let this come up to the surface. It'll get there eventually. It went down to 0 meters, so, you know, that's expected. As I said, we'll get there eventually. There we go. Cool. So now we're just going to, yeah, this is resting in its correct orientation. Cool. And we are going to see what we've got for thrust to weight here. I don't expect it to actually be all that much. This is probably not going to take off, for the record. Let's see what happens. Okay, yeah, this is, it's going. Kind of. So we might want to consider vectors for this instead of SRBs. We are getting some amount of speed here, but I don't know how much speed we need to actually take off. That's the real question. But the SRBs are clearly not doing the trick. But at least we found a position where we can test in the Explodium now. So that seems reasonable. The SRBs accelerated us up to about 16 meters per second. And now we're continuing to decelerate here. So let's revert this back to the VAB. I think we need to upscale those into vectors. So that is fine. We're going to upscale those to roughly the same booster that we had before, but we just need to get this enough forward propellant that we can lift off, right? We don't need our thrust to weight to be 1 to do this. We just need to figure out exactly what this needs to look like. So we are going to go with like T800s here, and that's going to go like that. I'm going to put a second T800 back here, and then maybe a third one up here. I'm not 100% on that yet. This might be too much. And then we would put aerodynamic nose cones up here. And in the back, we're going to put in vectors. So this is the most powerful engine that we have at this size. And the question is that going to do the trick? I also probably want to strut these a bit. So let's strut this from here directly over to here, just to make sure it's a little bit more solid. Okay, so something along those lines. And what is that thrust to weight going to be This is in Kerbal, vacuum. I don't want to be Kerbal. I want to be Eve, atmosphere. 0.65, that is a significant improvement. Okay, this will only have 43 seconds of burn time. The question is, does that get high enough for our hydrogen engine to take over? Remember, we need to, in order to hit 1.0 thrust to weight, we need to get up to like 26 kilometers. So that is a fair amount of altitude, but we don't need 1.0 thrust to weight to get this thing going. So, let's go. We're heading over to Eve, and we're going to test the takeoff of this. Now we're going to have to bob back up to the surface, which isn't surprising. It's a few hundred meters, and that's fine. We're rising at 21 meters per second. This is not really a concern. Assuming we don't tip over the wrong direction, but with no actual intervention, we tipped over the correct direction previously. Yeah, that looks good. No intervention there. And let's see what happens when we attempt to fire this plan with vectors. I'm sure that this will not cause any problems with all this explodium, right? Right? Yeah. So off we go. This is immediately significantly higher thrust to weight. But is it enough to even get us out of the water? Now I'm going to retract the landing gear here. Oh, hello. Hello. This is a good sign. It's a real good sign. The question is, can we hold this attitude once these guys go away? Which they're not going to last for too much longer. Now, keep in mind, we're going retrograde right now. In reality, we'd want to turn this around, and we'd want to be going prograde. But for now, this is okay. This is just a proof of concept. Ooh, that's an exciting detach. Okay, this is wanting to nose down. Our airspeed is dropping, so that is not enough altitude. Okay. So we're going to revert that back to VAB. That is a fairly successful takeoff, but we clearly need additional fuel for it. I feel like we had a pretty decent amount of thrust to weight headroom there, so we can definitely do that. What that would end up looking like is we'd have like additional fuel tanks here. Basically, we would duplicate this, right? And we would position it up over here like this. But instead of, and I want these to be strutted together, instead of having this have a vector engine, it would just have a fuel line. And then we would detach this out here first. So we would ditch this vector engine. And this whole thing is a little too high up here. Oh, where's the connector? There it is. So we would need to move this down a bit, maybe a bit further than that. Yeah, to about here or so. And then move it back a little bit to about here or so. Okay, something kind of like this. And then that would be fuel lined in. It's essentially doubling our amount of fuel here. So we would fuel line that in like so. And then we would have the detachment here happen first. Well, this would go here. And then these would detach and yeah, it would be something kind of like this. Question is, what does that do to our overall thrust to weight? It does drop it, but I think we can still get off the ground with that. Let's find out. This does seem promising, but it's getting it off the ground and to a high enough altitude. That's going to be a pretty major deal. Okay, so let's open up the cheat menu, and let's hit the launch button. We'll see if this closes. Okay, teleport it. Before we have anything break. Thank you. So this is definitely an interesting design. No doubt about that. We're going to have to rise up, of course, and that is fully expected. It'll take a little bit of time to do that. We're actually rising up at a significantly lower rate this time, 14.8 meters per second, presumably due to the higher weight. So that's understood. We have doubled the amount of liquid fuel and oxidizer we're bringing here, so that's definitely a thing. This is definitely an interesting way to take off. No doubt about that. Okay, so we are oriented nicely. Let's see how this goes. We're currently at 180 degrees. Can we actually... I'm checking to see if we can turn this. Maybe. But we're going to be oriented in the opposite direction in reality, so this is fine. We're just going... We're trying to proof of concept this, right? So let's make our way on up. So let's fire up these engines. I'm going to retract our landing gear because that should have been retracted a while ago. There we go. And we're going to start taking off fairly soon here. We're at about 35 meters per second here. What's our takeoff speed? This is taking longer to take off, no doubt about that, presumably due to the lower thrust to weight. Uh-huh. So thrust to weight is definitely an issue here. We did get there, but only after we burned basically all of this fuel. In fact, we did burn all of it, and we should ditch it. Okay. So we need to be trying to get, like, a bunch of altitude here, right? Let's hang this at about 45 degrees and just try to get as much altitude as we can. We're losing airspeed like that. Okay. So we need to sit somewhere around here and get as much altitude as possible. So... we're definitely running into some thrust to weight issues. That's noted. There are some potential other options that we can go with here. So let's just hold this attitude for now. Unfortunately, we're not getting a huge amount of altitude out of this, and yeah, this drops, which was expected, and our airspeed then starts to drop as well. That detachment is not great, and we definitely want to address that. But yeah, you can see here we're nosing down, and that is happening, of course, because we don't have enough airspeed. So that is understood. We also burned 5 tons of our hydrogen there, and that's not necessarily ideal. So, some other things we can think about doing here. I think the vector plan is a good one. But what if we don't burn any of the hydrogen at this moment, and we duplicate this to also be on top of the wings? It's kind of wild. The other option is that we do put vectors on here and we just drain it twice as quickly. Maybe we should try that first. So what we would do is these vectors would go here, and we would have this go in this stage. Like that. Now, I still don't think that this is going to bring us up to a decent position here. This is 0.85 thrust to weight. We could almost vertically take off with this, and that's noted. So let's put this out on the pad, and let's give this a good test. I want to know what this feels like at this thrust to weight. And we may consider adding 1 additional fuel tank without a vector on the outside. That'll be an interesting position there. We can put this at, I don't know, like 350. Yeah, that's a little bit better. That puts us basically at the surface, so we don't have to wait for it to rise. Excellent. So that looks good. And let's fire up with just the vectors and see how that goes. I'm retracting the landing gear right now. Yeah, we can see that this definitely drains out very, very quickly. But we're off. I want to put us at a 45-degree angle, assuming we can hold that attitude. And we can. For now, anyway. At least until these fall off. And we're going to have some detachment issues here, I think. That one's not a big problem. But we are losing airspeed once we lose these vectors. So, to that end, there are some things we could think about doing. Our airspeed is starting to even out at this point. It's starting to go up again. That's noted. But I'm willing to bet that we're not going to be in a good position here. Now, we should probably have these wings be detachable. That is certainly something to think about. And we're just pushing up this apoapsis. It needs to be a fair amount higher than this, though. Okay. So those vectors are gone. And we are, of course, losing all of our airspeed to drag. Now, that is not surprising at that point. So that got us a decent amount of altitude. But we definitely need more, right? We need a lot more. If we had infinite fuel, that would obviously be fine. We could do this very easily, but we're not using infinite fuel, so that's not going to be a thing. The question here is, how can we get these engines burning a lot longer without succumbing to the tyranny of the rocket equation? That's the question. We could potentially have like a big old dorsal tank, but I think we'll have some attitude control issues if we do that. So I think this is reasonably fine. It's just we're lacking a little bit of thrust. We could upscale this from a hydrogen tank. I would prefer not to, but that is a theoretical option. Another thing we could do is include some big ol' SRBs right in here. So that would end up being, or maybe even on top here, that would end up being like Clydesdales as a hypothetical, like right there. Obviously, we'd want to have decouplers on there, but that's pretty ridiculous looking. I'm not going to lie. But if we were to do this, what thrust to weight does that put that at? 0.32. SRBs are really bad on Eve. Okay, that is noted. So we basically have to use liquid-fueled engines with methalox in order to take off here. So, other options are, we could get rid of these two vectors and these two vectors, and we could consider upgrading this to a Mammoth 2. It's ridiculously large, very silly looking, and will eat through this fuel incredibly quickly. 17 seconds. And it would have a thrust to weight of 1.26. What is our highest specific impulse at the ground here? So 270 is the Mammoth 2. The Vector is 285. So the Vector is definitely higher specific impulse at higher atmospheres. The Rhino would actually be slightly better than the Mammoth 2 in that regard. That would put us at... This hasn't updated. Can we update, please? It would be at 0.0? Really? Okay. Well, I guess that's not going to work. Why would that be at 0.0? Should be like twice the thrust here. Okay, whatever. It's basically the same specific impulse at atmosphere, so... I think that this would work. The question is, how do we do this, like I said, without succumbing to the tyranny of the rocket equation? We need more burn time on these vectors without adding a huge amount of additional mass. Well, we could do that by continuing to daisy chain these out. I don't know that that's a fantastic idea, but we can do it that way. So we can grab the rotate and translate tool, grab this guy, move it over this direction, and just have it get tucked in about there. And then we can do the same with this. Move it in, have it get tucked in about there or so. And then we can duplicate it and just continue doing that out this way. I would really prefer not to do that, but let me think about how we want to handle this. It is time to put a cut in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is an interesting proof of concept. We need to find a way to burn longer with this thrust to weight, right? That is absolutely very, very necessary. We need to burn a fair amount longer because we need to get a lot more altitude out of this. So we'll see what that ends up looking like, but this is an interesting idea for sure. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Xenocyte, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, Kintogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video. And as always, I will see you all next time.